Have you ever said "I'm sorry" for something that was never your fault, before you even had time to think about it? If a text left on read makes your stomach drop. If resting feels like falling behind. If you can comfort a total stranger's pain in seconds, but go completely blank the moment someone asks, "How are you really?" Don't scroll past this one. What you're about to hear might be the first time anyone has ever explained why. When most people hear the word neglect, they picture something dramatic. A child left alone, abandoned, unloved. But psychologists say the most common form of neglect looks nothing like that. Sometimes a child grows up with food on the table, clean clothes, a warm bed, and parents who love them completely. And they still grow into an adult who apologizes for existing, who can't rest without guilt, who feels like a stranger to their own emotions. Psychologist Dr. John Webb has a name for this: childhood emotional neglect, or CEN. And here's the strange part. It's not defined by what happened to you. It's defined by what didn't. No one asked how you felt. No one taught you that your emotions were safe to show. So your brain did what every brain is built to do. It adapted. Quietly. Invisibly. And it kept those adaptations running, long after they stopped being necessary. Today we're breaking down 9 of them. 9 things people who were emotionally neglected as kids still do without even realizing it. Stay until the end, because the last one is the quiet question almost every single one of these habits is secretly built around. Someone bumps into you, and somehow you're the one saying sorry. It feels like manners. It's usually something deeper. Many emotionally neglected kids learn early that keeping other people comfortable matters more than expressing their own needs, because showing frustration or disappointment only ever seemed to create more tension, never resolution. So instead of asking to be understood, you learn to take up less space. Therapists sometimes describe this as a version of the fawn response, a lesser-known cousin of fight, flight, and freeze, where a child learns that staying agreeable is the safest way to avoid conflict. It's not weakness. It's a nervous system doing its job. Over the years, that survival strategy turns into a reflex. You apologize for asking a question, for taking up someone's time, for having an opinion, even for your own feelings. Most people around you don't expect an apology. Your nervous system does. And underneath it is a belief that's been running quietly for years, that your needs matter a little less than everyone else's. Independence looks like a strength, and often it is. But there's a difference between choosing independence and never believing you had another option. If, as a child, your feelings were dismissed or your needs went unnoticed, your brain reached a simple, logical conclusion. Handle it yourself. Nobody's coming, so don't bother asking. As an adult, that strategy can look impressive from the outside. You're the reliable one, the friend who never complains, the employee who never asks for support. But carrying everything alone is exhausting. Not because life is unusually hard, but because you never learned that emotional support was something you were allowed to receive. Attachment researchers like John Bowlby describe this as a working model of relationships formed in early childhood, a blueprint your brain builds for whether other people can be counted on. If the early answer was no, your independence isn't really freedom. It's armor. And armor, worn long enough, starts to feel like your own skin. A one-word reply, a quieter than usual hey, a boss who walks by without smiling. Most people let these moments pass. For someone who grew up emotionally neglected, the mind treats them like evidence. Did I do something wrong? Psychologists call this hypervigilance, a heightened state of scanning that develops when a child's emotional environment felt unpredictable. Neuroscientist Stephen Porges, who developed polyvagal theory, describes this as your nervous system running constant background detection for danger, something he calls neuroception, often below conscious awareness. If love in your house sometimes felt warm and sometimes felt distant, without explanation, your brain learned to watch for the shift before it happened. That system doesn't switch off just because you grew up. It follows you into relationships, into your inbox, into a pause in conversation that probably means nothing. A delayed text becomes rejection. A tired face becomes anger. Meanwhile, the other person is usually just tired. Your body isn't reacting to now. It's reacting to a version of unpredictability it learned a long time ago. Someone asks the simple question, "How are you feeling?" And you pause. Not because you don't want to answer. Because you genuinely don't know. You can explain the situation in detail. Naming the emotion underneath it feels like reaching for a word in a language you were never taught. Psychologists have a term for this: alexithymia, difficulty identifying and describing your own emotional states. It often develops when a child's feelings were repeatedly ignored, minimized, or corrected instead of named. If no one ever said, "It sounds like you're disappointed," you never built the emotional vocabulary to say it yourself. So the feelings don't disappear, they just get relabeled. Stress becomes exhaustion. Sadness becomes numbness. Anxiety becomes tension you can't quite locate. Ironically, many people with this exact pattern are remarkably good at reading everyone else's emotions. They just never learn to turn that same attention inward. You walk into a room and instantly feel that something's different. Nobody said anything. Nobody raised their voice, but you know. And before long, you're cracking a joke, changing the subject, quietly smoothing things over. From the outside, this looks like kindness. Underneath, it's often something a child learned for survival. Kids raised in emotionally unpredictable homes become fluent in tiny signals: a heavier sigh, a forced smile, a door closed slightly too hard, because reading those signals once helped them stay safe. Over time, an unspoken belief forms: if I can keep everyone else calm, maybe I'll be okay too. That belief doesn't retire when childhood ends. It follows you into adulthood as the instinct to become whoever the room needs. The one who checks if everyone's okay, who feels guilty saying no, who quietly carries emotional weight that was never theirs to carry. This is often labeled people-pleasing, but underneath it isn't really about being liked. It's the fear that conflict could cost you the connection itself. It's strangely easy for you to care about everyone else, and strangely hard to care about yourself. A friend says they're overwhelmed. You clear your schedule instantly. But when you're exhausted, you tell yourself, "It's not that serious. Other people have it worse. I'll deal with it later." This pattern is common in adults whose needs, as children, were overlooked or delayed often enough that the brain absorbed a quiet lesson: my feelings can wait. Years later, that belief becomes a lifestyle: postponed rest, ignored burnout, relationships that quietly drain you. Not because you enjoy struggling, but because taking care of yourself never got modeled as normal. You're not failing at self-care. You're repeating an emotional environment you never chose, this time running it on yourself. For a lot of emotionally neglected kids, love and attention weren't guaranteed. They were responses. Good grades got noticed. Achievements got praise. Just existing, quietly and imperfectly, often didn't. So a belief takes root early: I am valuable when I produce. As an adult, that belief can look like ambition, but it rarely feels like peace. Rest brings guilt instead of relief. A finished project barely registers before you're chasing the next one. Psychologists sometimes connect this to contingent self-worth, where your sense of value depends entirely on performance, rather than existing simply because you exist. The exhausting part isn't the achieving. It's that no accomplishment ever quite closes the gap, because the gap was never really about achievement in the first place. It was about never having been told, plainly, that you were enough before you did anything at all. Someone asks you for another favor. You're already running on empty. And somehow, you still say yes. Not because you want to, but because saying no feels unbearable. Psychologists often see this in adults who learned early that keeping others happy was the safest option. If disagreement once brought criticism, or having needs was called selfish, the lesson wasn't it's okay to protect my energy. It was if I disappoint people, I might lose them. That's why even small boundaries can feel emotionally dangerous. Saying no feels cruel. Choosing yourself feels wrong. But healthy relationships were never built on constant sacrifice. They're built on mutual respect. Boundaries aren't walls that push people away. They're doors that teach people how to treat you. And one of the biggest steps toward healing from emotional neglect is realizing that protecting your peace doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you an emotionally healthy one. And this brings us to the quiet question underneath almost everything we've just talked about. Many emotionally neglected kids grow up without consistent emotional validation. No one who reliably confirmed that their feelings mattered simply because they existed. So they grow into adults who measure their worth through other people. One compliment feels wonderful. One moment of distance can undo it completely. Psychologist Mark Leary calls this the sociometer, the theory that self-esteem functions like an internal gauge, constantly tracking how accepted we feel by others. For most people, it fluctuates gently. For someone who never got consistent emotional reflection as a child, it can swing hard because it was never given a stable baseline to return to. The healing isn't about collecting more proof from other people. It's about learning to ask a different question. Not do other people think I'm enough? But, can I finally believe that I already am? If any of this felt uncomfortably familiar, here's what's worth remembering. None of these patterns appeared by accident. Your brain did exactly what every healthy brain is built to do: adapt, survive, protect. The version of you that stopped asking for comfort wasn't weak. The version of you that learned to read every room wasn't broken. They were surviving the only way they knew how. But survival and healing aren't the same thing, and the strategies that protected you as a child may be the very thing standing between you and the closeness, confidence, and peace you actually deserve. If this video described a part of your story, tell me in the comments which sign hit closest to home. And if you're the kind of person who feels a stranger's pain like it's your own, who cries at music that seems to speak straight to you, who absorbs the mood of a room before anyone says a word, the next video is going to explain exactly why. We're going deep into the neuroscience of hyperactive mirror neurons and the highly sensitive person trait. Subscribe to Decoded Psychology so you don't miss it, because sometimes understanding your past isn't about staying there. It's about finally giving yourself permission to build something healthier.